You need to agree with your client. Here's how we're going to work together. Here's how I'm going to get paid. Here's how we're going to know that I'm done. Here's how I'm going to report status, all that good stuff. Get that in place before you get started. I've seen a lot of people try to work on their own and they don't do this and they get themselves in a lot of trouble. So I just want to encourage you, if you're considering doing this, don't be overwhelmed by it, but do it. Have you been working in tech for a while and you're kind of getting tired of being susceptible to the corporate policies, the employee handbook, and all the political silliness? Well, now may be the time to consider working for yourself. And that can be very daunting if you've ever considered it. But one of the easiest ways to go on your own, if you feel like now might be the time to consider it, is to become a solo tech consultant. I did this myself about 7 years ago. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this if you're brand new to your career, but if you've got some particular skills that you've gotten pretty good at, you see a value and a desire for them in the market, and you'd like to try your hand at seeing if you can build some authority in the industry and a name for yourself, or at least have an ongoing list of potential clients that come to you for your expertise, I want to give you some really practical steps today to go from, I don't even have an idea how to get started, to finishing your first project and actually getting a referral so that you can go to your next client and go, look at the great work I did for this one. Now, most of these steps are going to be, when I talk about the particulars, very comfortable to people who live in the United States. But if you're living in Spain, in India, in, let's say, the UK, you might have to do a little bit of adjustment to the particulars of how you accomplish these, but they're going to be the same no matter where you live and no matter what you do. If you're a programmer, if you're a product manager, if you're in DevOps, if you're doing engineering management or process improvement, agile coaching, really anything related to the software industry or tech, you can follow these same 10 steps and they'll help you get started. And one thing I should mention is I actually have a coaching package called Solo Dev. If you're at the point in your career where you're considering doing this, and let's say you watch this episode today and you're like, this is exactly what I need to do, and you'd like a little help, I walk people directly through this and support them through coaching. So there's a link in the description. You can check it out if that's you. But let's get right into it. Here's 10 steps to become a solo tech consultant. The first thing you need to do is design your services, or service design is the term for this. And this is really to look at, what do you offer today out of all the type of work that you do on the job that you could package up into a menu, so to speak, to offer to potential clients or customers? I think one of the biggest mistakes I ran into when I first started thinking about going solo is I thought, okay, I got to, just like an employee, offer to the open market every possible programming language, agile coaching approach I've used, that I can do DevOps, I can do continuous delivery, I can help people with lean product management, and just open that up wide to the entire industry and work for myself. And that doesn't work very well. It really waters you down. Instead, you want to pick one or maybe two really strong focus areas that you would like to offer in the market. Now, I can make a whole episode on this. There's certain things you want to take into account, like, can you package this up into something that you feel pretty confident you can complete, even if the client's people, let's say, make mistakes? For instance, if you just try to go solo as a consultant and you're just a developer, an individual contributor, that's not quite the same as being a consultant. You're really just a member of their team. And I'm going to talk in a lot more detail about that in a future episode. But regardless, the first thing you need to do before you even think about any of this is look at the work that you do today and try to think, what could I offer to the market? For instance, for me, when I go out and offer myself for consulting services to clients, I have a flat bill rate, dollars per hour that I charge for software architecture consulting. There's a certain rate I charge for that. If they want DevOps consulting or cloud architecture consulting, there's a little bit higher rate for that. If they want lean product management consulting, there's a higher rate for that. But I also offer basically packaged services that I can't really get into detail. They're more specific to customers that want to work with me, but these are like kind of done for you packages of things that I offer today that I can go out and sell in kind of a fixed method. Now, I'll give you an example. If you were in DevOps, for example, you could sell a package that's like a configuration management audit. You go into a company and you audit, where are all their configuration settings across their software products, their platforms, how are they using it in source control, and produce some sort of report or some sort of, plan for them that shows them, hey, if you want to actually achieve DevOps, one of the things holding you back today is you need to get a handle on your configuration management. Now, you might actually do the work then to remedy it, or you might bring in another consulting firm or just, produce the plan for them. Now, that's just an example, though. I don't want you to think of that example I just gave and think, everything that I might want to do in my career related to tech, I have to package up into an audit. That's just one example of a service. But regardless, come up with a menu of services that you can offer so that when you're talking to people and they wonder, what do you do? How can you actually help me? It's not just this open end, well, I'm a developer and I know, 40 programming languages and I'll do whatever you want. You got to specialize and have it priced and ready specifically for the customer that you want to sell to. The second thing you need to do when you're going to become a solo consultant is you need to discover who your client really is. This is going out on the internet, going to trade shows, reading, articles, doing whatever you can to do a little bit of research to try to figure out who are the people that are most likely to buy these services I just designed. If you just designed a service, let's say to help companies convert their code from, vanilla JavaScript to React or something like that, you need to not just talk about that, wide open to the entire internet. Likely it's better if you can try to figure out, where do people go to actually find out how to modernize JavaScript applications? Are there existing influencers that are talking about it already that I can start to contribute to their conversations and become part of their community? Are there books that are already written about it? Maybe there's a focus group or an area on Facebook where people discuss that book and you can join and be part of that community and eventually raise some awareness. But basically, you want to figure out, if you're going to go out and sell your own services as a tech consultant, who specifically is going to buy, and then what are the attributes of them? I talked about this in an earlier episode of the show where I talked about selling your ideas, that you want to understand your clients, demographics, like how old are they on average, and a bunch of details that are very basic, but you also want to find out their psychographics, things like, are they very risk averse? They avoid risk. Are they risk takers? There's a whole variety of things related to this. And again, I can make a whole episode on this, and I probably will down the road. But if you're going to be successful in becoming a solo tech consultant, I think one of the things you don't want to do is just necessarily use some of these freelance websites where you just post yourself for hire. You want to be more professional and exclusive than that. You want to actually reach the best customers only yourself. The third thing you need to do if you want to become a solo tech consultant is you got to price your services appropriately. Find out, how does that customer prefer to buy? Would they like to pay for the whole project up front? Would they like to pay month to month? Do they want to pay per hour? Now, the client's going to have the way that they would like to pay for your services, but you're going to also have the ways that you would like to get paid. For example, some of my clients who hire me as a career coach, they would probably prefer to just pay for sessions one at a time when they feel like it. The problem with that is then if they don't like one session, they're not going to come back for the next one and they're not going to get results. And so I actually basically require that clients, if you were to come to me for help, for example, that work with me as a coach, you have to invest in a minimum of 6 coaching sessions, because I know if you don't spend at least that much time working on your career with me, you're not going to get anything actually tangible. You're going to have buyer's remorse. And I'm not going to have actually produced any value in your career. So that's just an example. Career coaching is probably not what you're doing, but you do want to think about, how do I take the combination of how the client would like to pay for working with me and the best way that I can help them be successful and make potentially the best money, and come up with a good compromise. And I want to encourage you, you don't have to get this right out the gates. I've changed my pricing 4 different times since I started career coaching. You'll see often products change their pricing models. They might even change from an annual, purchase of a subscription to a SaaS product, let's say, into monthly or something like that. So I think a lot of times when we think about going on our own as a tech consultant, we think automatically, I got to just charge people per hour. But again, if you're selling a package of like, I'm going to do a done for you security audit, or I'm going to do a done for you, audit of your, let's say, React component library, you can give that, you can give a fixed price for that and actually charge for the whole thing up front. The pricing is a complex topic. Again, could make a whole episode on it, but that's one of the biggest things that you got to kind of figure out before you get started. The 4th thing to do if you want to be a tech consultant and have ongoing work where you can work for yourself is you need to build awareness to your clients that you even exist and you offer what you do. Obviously, having a website is good. If you meet people, or if you just find them online, you can send them to your website. You can tell them what you do, and that's super important. I've got a website. But if you're trying to reach people without having to go to a conference and fly halfway across the world or do in-person activities all the time to find potential clients, you might leverage digital marketing a little bit more. And the best way I like to leverage digital marketing, and I would encourage you to possibly consider, depending on what you do, is content marketing, which is exactly what I'm doing. I did a whole show on this earlier this year, but content marketing is basically where you put out YouTube videos or podcasts or blog posts. Maybe you have, a Substack, and you help your potential client, people reading, or watching or listening to your content, with a part of the full solution that you would help them with. Show them, hey, I understand this problem space. I'm going to give you some real value for free, and hopefully a lot of it through, multiple things. Now, do you have to create over 140 videos like I have? No, I've been doing this for 7 years. But one of the best ways that you can not have to spend time, I know a lot of people worry, if I'm going to become a solo consultant, I got to spend a ton of time finding clients, is content marketing. When you create content, if it's good content, you put it out there, really helps your potential client. It's like a person you hired that works for you. They're out there constantly telling people about your services. And by they, I'm embodying, a piece of content as a person, so to speak. So think about how you're going to raise awareness. Now, I'm not saying that's the only way you have to raise awareness. You can meet people in person. It can be great for higher ticket, tech consulting packages that you offer. But if you're going to start working for yourself, one of the first things you got to do once you figure out, what am I going to offer? Who's going to buy it? How much is it going to cost? Is how are people going to even know about it? The 5th thing you need to do is incorporate. At least in the United States, I would recommend start probably with an LLC or a limited liability corporation. It's a couple $100s here in Texas. If you file yourself, I'm in Austin. There is like LegalZoom, and there's lots of websites where they'll do it all for you and you pay a little bit more, sometimes a lot more. But ultimately, you do want to have a business entity of some sort so that if you got sued for some reason, if you had charges pressed against you because of some big mistake that you made, they can't actually reach into your personal finances or, affect like your house or, any of your personal property. It allows you to keep the business and your assets completely separate. And, obviously, if you incorporate, you're going to have to come up with a name. That's a whole topic in and of itself, but also you want to create then a business bank account of some sort. Minimally, you need a checking account that is associated with your LLC so that, if you buy, let's say, a laptop to do work with, or you purchase business insurance, or you host your website on, Squarespace or Amazon or something, you want to do all your financials through your business account. So it makes it easy to do taxes at the end of the year. You also need to find a registered agent. This is someone that you pay so that if you don't have a physical address, you usually get a P.O. box like I do. I have a P.O. box that's my business's address, but also the registered agent sort of is a third party that a lot of your business correspondence goes through. Just search for registered agent and incorporation. But essentially, there's some business related stuff you got to do to just kind of check your boxes, make sure you're a legitimate business and that you're filed with the state and that you're protected. And you're probably going to want to get some form of insurance as well. When I work with clients, typically I have insurance that a software architect or software developer would have. I think it cost me around $4,000 a year, close to $5,000. And that would give me general liability insurance as well as what's called errors and omissions insurance, which ensures you that hey, if you make an error or omit something, which, hey, we do this as programmers all the time, and it's like a big problem and the client, wants to press charges, heaven forbid, I've never had this happen to me, but let's say they do, you can get insurance up to, a couple $1 million worth of damages to that company should they try to seek them, that then would protect your business's assets. Remember, they can't go after your personal assets if you've got a company or an LLC. This is a huge topic, but I'm just trying to plant some seeds with, what you probably want to do, which is incorporate, kind of make sure you do all those things before you get started as a solo tech consultant. So now you got everything in place. You're reaching clients. You've got services to sell. You've got a company. You know what it's priced. Now you need to actually acquire the clients, seal the deal, find them, talk to them, tell them what you offer, get enough interest that you can close a sale. This is just learning, how do I talk to a potential customer or a client about what I do and overcome their objections? So if they're concerned that I don't have enough experience, give them references. You can even talk about work that you've done in corporate, jobs you've had before you went on your own. Obviously, if you've been a consultant, that can give you extra clout because you've already kind of done it for an agency. But, just learning to have conversations with people where you just talk about what you do and offer to help them with their problems and offer what you have and hear how they respond to it. I would encourage you to just feel comfortable that the first few conversations you have, you may not immediately close the client. That's okay. That's part of the process of learning. Now, if you're the type of person who's just terrified of rejection, I think a lot of people will just say, well, I'm not going to do this because if I get rejected, I'm the type of person who hates rejection. I can't deal with rejection. That is a limiting belief. I just want to let you know it's not a truth. I help people with career coaching through limiting beliefs like that. There's actually a person who, I think they wrote a book possibly, or they have a podcast about this, where they decided to ask for permission for something that they were pretty sure they would get rejected by every day for 100 days. So it was like they just got rejected day after day after day for 100 days. And what they found is so often they actually didn't even get rejected. And beyond that, they just started to build that muscle of not taking rejection personally. I think many of us have had a rejection earlier in our life from, a parent or a love interest or, a job that we've carried around maybe some baggage about. And that could prevent us from starting to work for ourselves. And that would be a shame. If you're a professional, it's time for you to really grow, and that holds you back. So there are ways to deal with that. So you've talked to a client. They love what you offer. They've agreed. Let's do business. How do you actually get into a business agreement with them and actually start the project? Well, you need to negotiate using some sort of contract. There are a few minimal documents that you need if you're going to be a solo tech consultant. One of these is called an MSA, or a Master Services Agreement. Now, I'll be honest, not all consultants use these. I sure do. I think they're really valuable. The Master Services Agreement is basically a document you write. And again, you can go out online and you can find starter MSAs and kind of tweak them to your liking. But they're basically documents that have a bunch of legal clauses in them that you give to your client that says, hey, when we do business together, here's some rules I'd like us to agree on to make sure we protect our relationship. These are things like, if things don't work out for some reason, we agree not to smear each other on social media. These are things like, if you're going to pay me, here's how often I'm going to invoice you, and here's how long you have to actually deliver payment. Things like, if there's a dispute, you can say, here's the state I'd like the dispute to be handled. If it goes to court, you can also indemnify yourself from things if you don't want to actually have any liability for things. Again, when you work for a company, you often agree to these things. And if you actually agree to do work for the client, they might provide you with a document that says, hey, to do business with us, here's the way we want you to agree, to what you're going to do. It's really important that you have the same thing. MSAs usually cover 2 to 5 years worth of work. So the idea is, you give this to your client that's about to do business with you. Hey, okay, well, to get started, one of the first things I need you to do is sign my MSA. I'll send over an email with it. So you send them the Master Services Agreement. The idea is it's got all the clauses and all the information about how it's going to work for you two to work together. And it's got a spot for you to sign your name at the bottom. And then they have to sign, a representative at the company. And it becomes a legally binding document. Now, sometimes this has to go through their legal department. It can even take a couple weeks up to, again, depending on what you're doing, months to have this happen. Now, if the client's really motivated, they'll do it fast. I've had MSAs approved in 3 days. So it depends, but it's really important that you get that signed, because the idea is, once you do, let's say it's for 5 years, you can do multiple projects, multiple efforts, sell multiple things to that same client for the next, let's say, 5 years. And they don't have to put all that through legal over and over again. So it kind of makes it easier for you to sell new projects. How does that work? Well, because then there's the second document, which is a statement of work, or SOW. You may have heard this. The statement of work is basically a document that says, here's a project or an effort we're going to do together. Again, it could be some sort of audit. It could be a gap analysis. It could be a proof of concept you're going to code for them. It could be some product management coaching you're going to do for their product managers. Depends on what you're offering, but your statement of work is going to say, here's how much you're going to pay me and what the terms are. Now, again, you've already established in the Master Services Agreement how often you're going to invoice them and how you're going to expect payment. But the statement of work might have, like, for this project, the specific terms. They can override the MSA. Again, I don't want to get into too many details. This can sound a little crazy. It's not as complicated as it sounds. But I always encourage people, in your statement of work, leave estimates out of it, leave the scope as open as possible. You don't want to get into a, fighting match as the project moves forward around things and have details in the statement of work get you in trouble. But ultimately, you need to agree with your client. Here's how we're going to work together. Here's how I'm going to get paid. Here's how we're going to know that I'm done. Here's how I'm going to report status. All that good stuff. Get that in place before you get started. I've seen a lot of people try to work on their own and they don't do this, and they get themselves in a lot of trouble. So I just want to encourage you, if you're considering doing this, don't be overwhelmed by it, but do it. The eighth thing that you'll need to do if you want to work for yourself as a solo consultant is you're going to have to manage the engagement. Now, there's the work that you're going to be doing: coding, coaching, advising, whatever it is that you're doing around technology. There's the bread and butter work that they hired you to do. But there's also just managing the relationship and expectations. And, they call it, when you're doing work with a client as a consultant, it's the engagement or project. But these are things like keeping track of your time if you're working per hour. These are things like deciding, okay, maybe you decided in the statement of work, we're going to have a once a week meeting on, Thursdays for an hour and a half where we're going to discuss the status of the project and let the client describe any open issues or give updates. I mean, I'm just giving examples, but you're going to have to make sure you get those things done and you track them. Depending on what you're doing, you could have some KPIs or key performance indicators that are some set of data or numbers that the client is looking at that you're periodically updating that lets them know. Like, let's say, hey, we're converting a legacy code base from, some other language like Java to, Node or something like that. And they want to know how far along are we percentage wise. You might have that be a key thing that people are tracking. And you're also ultimately going to probably have situations where what you agreed to do in the statement of work changes. You start working on the project and you discover, oh, there's this other part of a system at the company that I didn't consider, or there's this other department that I need to get their buy-in to move forward. Well, you can't just do that work. You need to make sure you get paid for it because it's new scope. And in consulting, we call these change requests. They're basically mini statements of work that say, this document amends or adds to the original statement of work and says, we're going to do this extra work. You get that in front of your client, you have them review it. Again, they put it through legal, they sign it, and you make sure you get paid for the extra work you're doing that was scope that was not included. So, managing the engagement, having good client communication, all that stuff, it's something you'll get better at the more you do it. Don't feel daunted about this, but you're probably, if you're an individual contributor, you're already doing some of this every day on your project. You're just not doing it in a formal way that a consultant would be. Now, the ninth thing that you need to do if you want to be a solo tech consultant is you need to keep pretty good financial records. You need to keep track of how much is the client paying you. You need to have some idea, and it's just a guess. Everybody guesses when they start this. How much money do I think I'm going to make this year from consulting? The first year I went on my own, I guessed that I would make, $100,000 a year. I thought I would make a lot less than I did when I worked for the agency. I ended up making a lot more, and I had more taxes I had to pay at the end of the year. That's okay. I made more money than I expected. That's not something to complain about. I had to pay a little bit of a penalty for underpayment of taxes. Was the penalty more than the extra money I made? Not even close, though. So, I want to encourage you, as long as you try to keep good financial records and you're just trying to be honest and you're trying to understand, what does the IRS need from me? Again, maybe you hire an accountant to help with this. I didn't. I did it all on my own at first. You're going to be okay. I think this hangs up a lot of people too. They get really freaked out. But you need to have invoices of some sort. I just use literally a document in Google Docs that I update the date and I put the number of hours. Again, if I'm doing hourly consulting, if I'm doing per project, I'm fixed bid, it's a little different, but it's got the address of your company and the contact information for your client and the days that you did it. Now, there's a million SaaS products you can use out there, like Get Cheddar, and you can log your time using those. I prefer not to pay for that. When you're starting out as a tech consultant, you want to have your overhead or your business expenses be as low as possible. So I do a lot of stuff through Google Docs and spreadsheets. It works fine. I have no problem with it. My clients have never had problems with it. You just have to, every time you invoice your client, make a copy of the invoice for the next, week or month or however often you're invoicing. Change the time in there and then give them the next one. But, you got to get in that rhythm of making sure you're contacting your client so you actually get paid. And then on top of that, you want to, like I said, use QuickBooks or a spreadsheet or something so that each time you get paid, you start to decide, okay, let's say I just got paid $4,000 or, $3,000 or $8,000, whatever amount you got paid, whatever period it was, based on the guess of how much money you think you're going to make. Again, this is more specific to the United States. I talked about this at the beginning of the episode. It's then going to tell you, oh, here's about how much money you should not do anything with and reserve for taxes. Now, you can pay it immediately then, but what I typically do is I just track over all the money I'm making for the first quarter. There's quarterly estimated tax payments. I'll talk about this in another episode, but if you want to work for yourself in the United States, you have to pay the IRS an estimate of how much tax you're going to need to pay that year for each quarter. It's not really that difficult. Again, you estimate it. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it's really just the main thing is don't spend all the money you get paid. You as a solo consultant, you have to pay your own taxes now. You don't have an employer holding back tax for you. But then when the end of the year comes and you need to file your taxes, you'll have really great records. You'll know how much you made. You'll know how much quarterly payments that you paid, and the IRS then will figure out how much you owe. I just use TurboTax. I know some people might be like, oh my God, you run your own business and use TurboTax? I'm a solo career coach and consultant. It's fine. It works great for me. I've used it for 7 years. So again, I want to encourage you, you don't have to go out and get some sophisticated financial management software to work on your own, but you do need to do the due diligence to think a little bit about how much money you think you're going to make, track what you are making, hold back some money for taxes, and make sure you pay it at the end of the year. And the 10th and final thing that you need to do if you're going to become a solo tech consultant is to finish really strong so you get a reference. It's really important if you're going to finish working with a client and build a great reputation in the industry that you finish strong. And what I mean by that is if you do an audit for a client, on their source control usage or something like that, have a document that you've produced for them, have a presentation that you give them, have whatever information they paid for be something they got a copy of. You've helped them make sure they can locate it, give them everything that they need documentation wise so that when you're done with that project, they're not like feeling like you just left them with a bunch of work that you did and they don't know how to interpret it and they can't take any action on it. Obviously, if you're doing any type of coding, just giving that client code as the deliverable, not the most professional way to handle it. You're probably going to want to have a document of some sort, an architecture diagram, some wiki topics, something that gives them some really good overview information that they can go back to and go, hey, Jamie doesn't work for us anymore. What did he build? How do I use that again? If you're doing cloud architecture, you're going to have to document, even if you're using Terraform or something, you're probably going to have to document sort of the approach and the major artifacts and assets you used. So now what the good thing is if you finish strong, you can ask for a reference. You'll see sometimes people who have a website and it'll be like, as seen in, or we worked with, and it'll have all these company names or TV, channels they've been featured on or podcasts they've been a guest on. You want to, as a solo tech consultant, have actual names of companies that you have helped. They could be startups, they could be big companies, it doesn't matter who they are. But, building a list of references, people that find you, that you're trying to tell them, hey, I really want to help you. You can talk about, here's how I helped this other person. That's going to make it easier. Now, again, when you're starting out fresh, you're not going to have those. And so you're probably going to have to work on a little bit smaller projects at first. And you may not be able to charge quite as high of a bill rate. You might, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing AI right now, depending on what it is, you can probably charge a lot potentially. But these are just 10 things that I hope helped you today to just give you a little bit of a roadmap if you're kind of feeling overwhelmed and like, how do I actually take actual action on this to get started working for yourself. And if you'd like some help from other people, or you just want to discuss some of the things you're running into related to starting working for yourself, you may or may not know I actually have a Patreon and a YouTube membership you can join. There's a link in the description. And you can basically join my Discord server. That'll give you access to a bunch of the clients I've worked with. You can talk to me. Now, it's not one-on-one coaching. Obviously, I talked about solo dev at the beginning of this episode. If you want, one-on-one help with your particular, company that you're starting, I offer a package to help with that. But if you just want to be part of a community that loves the channel, that's trying to stay healthy, but also thrive, consider checking that out. So what are you facing? Oh, are you considering working for yourself, and have you taken a first step? Have you taken the first maybe 5 steps, but you're stuck on one? Why haven't you moved forward? Leave me some comments. Until next time, thanks.